Ariel in the Little Mermaid movie that he actually said this?
From a scientific perspective, okay, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have someone with darker skin who lives deep in the ocean.
I remember that whole discourse. Life seemed so simple back then. I had to pull up the fact that in the animated cartoon series, there was black mermaids. I had to pull up the fact that in the televised musicals, there were characters, including the Little Mermaid, who were played by black people, as well as in the actual musical on Broadway. I had to do that as well. And then also point out, mermaids aren't real.
Talk about Matt Walsh. And if you're asking Matt who, then I'm truly envious of you. Normally, I wouldn't waste time responding to basically an internet troll, but Matt is so emblematic of everything that is wrong with the modern MAGA right. Faux outrage, self-victimization, verbal abuse, a walking, talking Dunning-Kruger. Now, Matt Walsh, who says he's a conservative Christian, is upset with me for being a Muslim and for being an immigrant, but above all else, for being an American. That he cannot stand. So he did an entire 13-minute video calling me a spiteful, lying, self-entitled brat, on top of his tweet in which he called me an ungrateful little bitch.
I've only seen this play out online between the two of them, but Matt is constantly doing this stuff where he's like, I'm a real American, you know, kind of stuff. He's like, you're not an American, get out of my country. Look, everyone hates you. And he uses Twitter as basically his evidence of that. He'll be like, you know, Mehdi Hasan will post something like, I'm as much of an American as you are. You know, the immigrants to the United States who become naturalized citizens are Americans and all that kind of stuff. And obviously, this won't shock anybody. The comments on the Nazi app fill up with Nazis. And then Matt Walsh uses the Nazis as evidence that he's somehow winning some kind of a war.
Just as Jesus would have said. Now, before we get into the substance of Matt's claims, if we can even call it that, before we get into what I said about Muslims and the founding of America, a little bit of background on who Matt Walsh is. Shock jock podcaster, former radio DJ, and now basically that Daily Wire guy who isn't Ben Shapiro. He's also the guy who hasn't got the greatest of political judgment. He went all in on Ron DeSantis in the GOP primary and then had to come crawling back to Trump when DeSantis got destroyed, as some of us predicted he would. Matt is also the guy who said COVID wasn't a big deal, that, quote, it's totally irrational to panic over this virus. He later admitted he got it wrong. But here's my favorite. Matt was so bothered by a black woman playing Ariel in the Little Mermaid movie that he actually said this.
From a scientific perspective, okay, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have someone with darker skin who lives deep in the ocean.
There are no words to describe how dumb you have to be to try and make scientific arguments about the skin color of mermaids, which are fictional fucking characters, Matt. This is the guy who millions on the right turn to for intellectual guidance.
Man, I remember that whole discourse. Life seemed so simple back then. I had to pull up the fact that in the animated cartoon series, there was black mermaids. I had to pull up the fact that in the televised musicals, there were characters, including the Little Mermaid, who were played by black people, as well as in the actual musical on Broadway. Had to do that as well. And then also point out, mermaids aren't real. They don't exist. They're not a real thing. So they can be played by anybody, which is kind of wild.
Historical analysis and thought leadership, then you wonder why this country is so screwed right now. By the way, just quickly, consistency isn't really his thing either. In May of this year, he said identifying as a girl dad is super cringe and corny. In 2020, though, he said being a girl dad is a great blessing. He constantly complains about political violence and death threats when they're aimed at him, but he's happy to dish it out to the people he doesn't like. He's called for the mayor of Chicago, a black man, to be executed. He's called for Jimmy Kimmel, a comedian, to be arrested. He once said this, too.
But it is, in fact, true that you have to make people hurt. And I'm sorry, but holding signs and yelling loudly will not make anyone hurt.
You have to make people hurt. Now, what's really bothering him about me is that I said in a recent visit to Dearborn,
I think that if you can play church bells, you can pray the call to prayer.
Isn't it okay for Muslim Americans to broadcast a call to prayer? I mean, let me add right now, within reason, of course, and in accordance with all local sound and noise ordinances.
No, you don't have to do all that. The answer is yes, of course.
But Matt went nuts. and said Christianity built this country. Islam did not at all in even the slightest way. That's why we can have our church bells. To which I responded, 1 in 3 of the slaves who built this country were Muslims. They were here long before the Walsh family arrived. You'd know that if you'd studied history, but I know MAGA has an issue with studying. To which Matt responded with a 13-minute video in which he got really mad, but was unable to rebut the 2 central points that I made.
Okay, the rebuttal I am going to play because I'm very curious about this, but I just wanted to give Mehdi some extra quotes that his team I think is too highbrow to have pointed out. But luckily for you, I'm lowbrow, and I wanted to animate some of the things that Matt Walsh has said. This is Matt Walsh in his own words, by the way. So this is actual Matt Walsh quotes, just playing out. It's his. It's not AI. It's not a actor playing Matt Walsh. It is Matt Walsh. It's 100% just Matt Walsh.
From the makers of What is a Woman and the new top 5 box office hit comedy Am I Racist comes a brand new Daily Wire animated...
Not this part. This part's me. That's my voice. But when Matt Walsh speaks, it's him in his own words. I just want to be clear about that.
series for the entire family. Real, actual things Matt Walsh has said.
Maybe this is more dramatic than what we've heard in before. When no one's actually said, it's over for us, we're done. Our race of people, we're singing our swan song right now. We're the last of the Mohicans, the last of the Anglos. It's not that we're just, as the Mexicans come in, we magically meld with them and become like them. It's not like that. It's that we are dying off, just like any other species of animal does. We're dying, and that's what's happening with us. The extinction of the Anglo-Saxon race is just like that.
Are you Hitler?
If you love the Timu Borat comedy stylings of Sweet Daddy Walsh, then you'll love watching the real things he said out loud get brought to life thanks to the magic of animation and billionaire petroleum investors. There's Matt Walsh giving his thoughts on kids and their dating life.
So to all of a sudden act like this phenomenon of girls getting pregnant at a young age that we consider young, 16 or 17, it's always been that way. Even biologically, and this is me just stating, right now I'm going to start by just stating facts. So fact number 1, it's not a new phenomenon. Fact number 2, in fact, it's a phenomenon that was more common earlier in history, and for, the first 6,000 to 10,000 years of human existence, it was a normal thing. Fact 3, girls between the ages of like 17 and 24 is when they're technically most fertile.
The fuck? There's Matt Walsh.
Just to be clear, because this seems to be a talking point that's being regurgitated right now by tech bros too. I saw some big tech bro the other day who was just basically in the middle of an interview being like, come on, guys, we have to admit this. No one wants to, but it's just the truth, right? Women between the ages of 16 and 20 is when they're the most fertile. Now, I'm not saying that that's when you need to have a child bride or whatever. That's not where I'm going with this, but I am saying that we should actually just accept biological fact. Okay, have any of you Googled this, or are you just all pedophiles? Because that's just not true. It's actually between 25 and 29. If you look at the totality of the scientific consensus has said that is when women are at their optimal fertility. And even then, women are capable of giving birth well beyond that. And something that never gets entered into the discussion that should also be talked about is that the quality of male sperm goes down over time, depending on your lifestyle. If you do lots of drugs, if you drink excessively, if you smoke cigarettes and stuff like that. So the actual quality of the sperm itself can be affected by the lifestyle of the male. Never brought into the picture. You never talk about peak male fertility or just lifestyle choices that men make that made actually impact the whole birth giving stuff. But the whole idea that it's like between the ages of 16 and 19 or when women are their most fertile, that's not backed up scientifically at all. That's just pedophilia. These are just pedophiles expressing their pedophilia that want the world to be like, wait, are you a fucking pedophile? No. This is just science. I'm just trying to talk about science. This is just the reality. Well, it's not true. It's just not true. You want a child bride. That's what you are saying out loud. You want a child bride.
Talking about slavery.
In fact, it seems rather clear that Black Americans are doing better here today than they would be had their ancestors generations ago never been brought to these shores. We can prove this point by simply asking which African country anyone asking for reparations would prefer to live in. The answer, of course, is none of them. It also ignores the fact that Africans participated in slavery and the slave trade as much as they were victims of it. Actually, what we can say is that we'd all end up worse. All of us today would be in a worse spot if slavery never existed at all across the entire globe.
And who can forget when Matt Walsh defended notorious pedophiles like Josh Duggar, Cardinal McCarrick, or all the offenders in the Catholic Church?
So in the 60s, you've got a bunch of homosexuals who start to join the priesthood, and the priesthood becomes a haven for homosexuality. And then around that same time, you've got a bunch of teenage boys who are being by priests. When those accusations started coming out, and then all this other information about Cardinal McCarrick came out, most of the stories that have come out about him revolve around his sexual exploits with seminarians. And seminarians are grown men in their 20s. So it's probably true that he was and sting boys, but we know that he was also involved in a lot of sexual activity with grown men.
After all, even if Matt Walsh is toning down his rhetoric to try and appear more mainstream, we should never forget that he's a white supremacist extremist who's reveled in targeting children's hospitals, doctors, and nurses alongside libs of TikTok that eventually led to mass bomb threats.
So yeah, you get the idea. He's not just a white supremacist. He's not just a weirdo racist. He's also pretty much a pedophile defender. I'll say defender at the end of that sentence. He's a disgusting, gross, sick man. But I am curious to see the debunking.
Number one, enslaved people helped build this country. And number two, perhaps up to 1 in 3 of those slaves were Muslims. Matt can't rebut that because it's true, according to historians, according to the African American History Museum, according to the US State Department. Muslim slaves are a historical fact. As his boss Ben Shapiro has famously declaimed, facts don't care about your feelings, Matt. It's not my fault if they didn't teach you about slavery in high school. In his video, Matt Walsh sounds like a Monty Python sketch. What did the slaves ever do for us? Ignoring the railways, the roads, the ports, the literal seat of our government, the White House and the Capitol, all built by enslaved people. And 1 in 3 of them, remember, being Muslims, black African Muslims. Matt is also just completely clueless about the Muslims who fought in the Revolutionary War, in the War of 1812, in the Civil War, where most of them fought in the Union Army. But then again, Matt's been pictured wearing a Confederate t-shirt, so maybe he's mad that the Muslims fought against the Confederacy. He even issues this challenge to me.
If Islam had ceased to exist 300 years ago, this country would not have lost a single thing.
This is new, right? Like, I haven't been watching Matt Walsh in a while, but I can't remember when he started doing the cottagecore this intensely. It's so try hard, though. Like, are you fucking kidding me? You have a canoe bookshelf in the background, and also it's in like 4 perfect squares. It's like, there's my little like wooden boat, I don't know, effigy here. We've got I'm assuming propane fireplace right there. Like the whole thing, it's all set, right? It's like Tucker Carlson chic, you're trying so hard to be a woodsman. No person I know who owns a cabin has anything like this. This is an IKEA showroom of what you think a person who works with their hands looks like. It's ridiculous.
There's not a single good thing about our country that we would not have if not for Islam. And if you doubt that, then go ahead and give me an example of the great gift that Islam has given to this country since its founding.
Has he never heard of the Golden Age of Islam, which helped fuel the Renaissance and the Enlightenment in Europe, which of course then helped produce the American founding fathers? Has he ever gotten off of the internet and read a book? But look, I'm happy to fill the gaps in his education.
Mathematics, guitars, lemons. I mean, come on. Just a lot of incredible things.
He asked me to explain what Islam or Muslims have done for America. I mean, the black Muslim slaves aside, more recently, how about the planning of the moon landings? That was a Muslim American
modern medicine, the first hospital.
How about the science behind modern skyscrapers? That was a Muslim American engineer and immigrant. How about brain tumor treatment? That was a Muslim American neurosurgeon and immigrant. Just this year, the Nobel Prize for Chemistry went to, among others, a Palestinian American Muslim immigrant whose research Matt could never possibly understand and whose work could help tackle man-made climate change, which Matt doesn't believe in. Because Matt Walsh's knowledge of science is right up there with his knowledge of history. So what does he do? The guy who can't rebut basic facts. He attacks me. He goes after me for a speech I gave nearly 2 decades ago, which I said awful, dumb, bigoted things about the gay community, about non-Muslims, which I've regretted, disowned, apologized for multiple times over the decades. He thinks it's a gotcha, but here's the problem for Matt. What I said back then are essentially Matt Walsh's views right now. Matt is an anti-gay bigot today. In fact, Matt supports a Uganda law imprisoning gay people. I don't. Matt thinks most pop music is satanic. I don't.
By the way, this is good. This is so much better than having to, have the Graham Plattner discourse. I'd much rather just be like, hey, growth is good, and admitting when you had bigoted views and changing them is important, because all of us have to do it. There's not one among us. Of the hundreds of people who are watching right now, none of you have not had some bigoted view at some point, or still have, or harbor some. We're all unpacking this shit all the time. So that is good. I know there was a lot of strange discourse that was going around the Graham Plattner, issue, where people were like, "Oh, by the way, you leftists, you always talk about restorative or rehabilitative justice, and all of you just want to finger point. You're all hall monitors, and you're just waving your finger." And it's like, no. To me, it's better if less people are homophobic. Net positive. The less homophobes walking around the world, the better the earth shall be. Absolutely. Same thing applies in all categories.
We're going to play the game of what were you saying in embarrassing videos decades ago? Here's what Matt Walsh was saying in 2010.
But to all of a sudden act like this phenomenon of girls getting pregnant at a young age that we consider young, 16 or 17, to act like it's a new thing is ridiculous. It's always been that way. Girls between the ages of like 17 and 24 is when they're technically most fertile.
That's pretty gross.
Yes.
Pretty disgusting, I think we can all agree. And also kind of creepy. A 25-year-old man telling his audience how fertile 17-year-old girls are? What is wrong with you, man? I mean, it's also ironic that the right are obsessed with smearing Muslims as child molesters and saying Islam supports child marriage, and yet here is Matt on tape saying that about 17-year-old girls, about children. So, look, to conclude, who is more American? The guy who supports free and fair elections, me, or the guy who got mad when judges locked up violent insurrectionists who tried to overturn the 2020 election, Matt Walsh? Who is more American, the guy who supports the First Amendment and free speech, me, or the guy who wants to imprison people and deport people for their speech, Matt Walsh? Who is more American, the guy who supports the United States, me, or the guy who wore a t-shirt celebrating the violent traitors of the Confederacy, Matt Walsh? Who is more American, the guy who supports religious pluralism and separation of church and state as intended by the founders, me, or the guy who wants Christian nationalism in America and proudly calls himself a theocratic fascist, Matt Walsh? Yeah, I think I've made the case that I'm much more of an American and much more of a patriotic American than you are.
But does he have a flannel cabin? I haven't seen it yet, so until then, still, I guess Matt is winning the America Challenge.
Matt, and you're just gonna have to go whine and cry about it. Did you like this video?
I did, it was funny. I'll give it a thumbs up. There you have it. Wow, 29,000 thumbs up. I'm actually surprised. I'm assuming they haven't done one of their campaigns where it's like, go over there, downvote it. Every downvote brings us closer to America. Here's something Matt Walsh was reposting the other day. This is an account called The General, 1776 General. Who's getting their EBT cut? Percentage of U.S. households receiving SNAP benefits. Afghanistan, Somali, Iraqi, Dominican, Caribbean, Native, Puerto Rican, Cuban, Black, Arab, Cambodian, Haitian, Pacific Islander, Honduran, and then all the way at the bottom, at only 8.6%, American white. Do you see this? The numbers speak for themselves, everybody. These are the people receiving the SNAP benefits. Essentially, America and now Donald Trump, they're refusing to feed people from other nations who are living within your borders. That's what's going on. We import the third world and force the working class Americans to feed and house them at gunpoint. Civilizational suicide. My God. Now this account, The General, has posted some other stuff. If you're curious what kind of views they have, here's The General. Quote, that's a lie. It's the Jew who opened the door to the West for all the trash browns. You are the benefactor of the Jew while crying about the Jew. And yes, the West has been invaded by Mongolians, Arabs, Jews. You don't want to talk about that enough. Why? Because we fought back and won fair and square. We didn't sit around crying like a pissy bitch like you lot. Strange. I just took 1 second to look it up, and it turns out that none of it's true. The majority of people who receive SNAP benefits are, in fact, and this will shock you, white Americans. 37%. They are the majority of people who receive SNAP benefits, which would make sense to the majority of the population. And there are a lot of poor white people who need assistance. And, you know, I would say at this point, it's pretty conclusive that white supremacists hate everything and everyone. And then it would appear here, including white people. Yeah. Matt Walsh doesn't care about white people. That's what's being shown here. He just wants to get himself some wins. Just hates everything. Really.
So thank you so much to our patrons for making this show possible. We could not fund it without you. And if you want to join, please check out patreon.com/theserfs to unlock bonus episodes, uncensored content, and all the good stuff. Thanks to Anna Loves Riley, Addercap, Bobby Lasers, Cheryl Alvarez, Comrade Junkie, Doug Caddy, Everything Important, Hegbard Salim, Multimondi, Omni, Political Papi, Preston Kroll, Quiet One 85, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Cernicus, Stellar Gwyn, Sebastian Demmel, Tigwick, and Words Greenwood.